Hey guys, Paul Mueller here. Just want to recap the Lake St. Clair Bass Elite event, the last regular season event of the year. Kind of go through, you know, pretty much my practice, short on my practice, but the whole event and kind of what I did, the adjustments I made, because I caught fish on a bunch of different baits in this one. Sometimes you only, fish a couple baits in an event when you do well. But this one I kind of had to fish different each day. So I finished in 10th overall. Kind of had a rough start to the tournament. I had a bad first day, 15 pounds, but then I caught good weight the next couple days and made some adjustments. And the weather changed just about every day. And I'm gonna just kind of roll through what I used and kind of the adjustments that I made. So in practice, it was kind of tough because you didn't get many bites. And when you did get bit, you didn't really want to fish that area thorough. So I really didn't know what the potential was on some of my areas in practice. But, I was catching fish from that 16.5 to about 19-foot range. And, basically there wasn't really anything special about some of the areas that I found in that there wasn't a lot of grass there wasn't hard bottom, wasn't much of a depth change. And that's typical St. Clair. There's not much of a depth change. But I was looking for something, you always look for something that's isolated or whatever, and that's usually something that holds big fish there. But I didn't find that. I found areas just kind of deep flats, that 16.5 to 18.5, 19 foot. Had some grass there, not any hard bottom at all. The main key was the forage. I could see on my Garmin Panoptics that there was perch there. And the first day I had a lot of areas that I had to check, and so some of my areas went dead because we had a wind shift. The wind shifted at into the north wind come tournament time, and that really moved some of my fish in some of the areas. So that's probably why I had a bad day, because I checked a lot of stuff. And so basically I had one primary area in the tournament, which I ended up fishing pretty much from day 2, day 3, day 4 in that area, and not really branching off it because some of the areas weren't good. The primary area I had was about 16.5 to 18.5 foot of water. It had some grass. There was 3 or 4 different types of grass there, but it wasn't big grass. There wasn't clumps of grass. Ideally, it would have been better to have tall clumps of grass, because a lot of times when that sun gets up, they'll get tight to those clumps. But they would just roam around. But the one thing that the area had was a lot of perch. And like I said, I could see it on my Garmin Panoptics, massive schools of perch. And the good thing about that one area is that the bait never left that area. So knowing that I was fishing for bass that were eating perch, that's kind of told me what I needed to do as far as techniques. So when there was kind of medium wind a lot of times, and even in the morning sometimes, I would fish a swim bait. My main swim bait was the Rains 3 1/4 inch Fat Rock Vibe shad. I had 2 colors. I would actually start off in the morning on the gizzard shad color, just a little bit brighter color, and then when it would get later in the day and the sun would come up, I would go to the Mueller's Madness color. And you notice that the tail is orange. All I do is dip a little orange spike it on the tail. Something I like to do when I'm fishing with perch. But gizzard shad in the morning, Mueller's Madness when it got later in the day. 3 1/4 inch. I tried the 4 inch Fat Rock Vibe. They just didn't seem to like it as much as this little one. The jig head that I used was a Do It Molds tube and tail jig. A lot of you guys know that I use this jig head pretty much exclusive with a lot of finesse swim baits. The hook on there was a 604 style Gamakatsu, which is it's a 90-degree jig hook. It's a heavy wire. It's a 3/0 size that I used, and a 1/2 ounce. And I think the 1/2 ounce was key. A lot of times what I would do is I would slow roll that swim bait on the bottom, and when it would come in contact with grass, I would rip it free. A lot of times I got my big bites when I'd rip it free from that short grass. Like I said, the grass was real short. It wasn't big clumps, but you had to make contact to trigger those bigger strikes, just slow rolling it. I think the heavier jig head allowed it to go a little bit faster through the water column, which sometimes is good when the water's warm like it was. Set up for using the swim bait, Dobbins Champion Extreme 764 SF, which is a 7'6" 4-power spinning rod. It's a medium heavy. A lot of guys know, from all my videos in the years, this is my favorite finesse swim bait rod. Long rod for long casts, good backbone, good tip. I get good positive hook sets on a long cast, and you need that with those smallmouth. They got a big thick mouth, and you need a rod that's got good backbone. The Real Lose Team Pro Speed Spin in the 3000, a little bit larger spool, 15-pound Gamma torque braid with a 10-pound Gamma edge fluorocarbon leader. Long leader, I was using probably about a 12 to 14 foot leader because the water was so clear. But that was my setup for the swim bait. When the wind would pick up, I would go to the crankbait, and I caught some key fish on a crankbait this week. Pretty much just one crankbait, Lucky Craft 3.5 deep diver. And basically the two adjustments that I made, you know, cranking was, for one, I was fishing it really fast, trying to burn it through that grass. And the whole key was to get a bait. The reason I like this bait, this was called a crack color. It looks just like a perch. The reason I like this bait is because in the area that I was fishing, I could make contact with the grass, but I wouldn't bury it in the grass. And so that was the key. You had to make contact with something to get those fish to trigger, and I also triggered them with speed. So that being said, a lot of times when I crank, I use a Lew's BB1, just a 5-to-1 gear ratio, especially with a plug that pulls hard like this. But I had to make an adjustment in this event and use a Lew's BB1 Pro 6.4-to-1 gear ratio, a little bit more line that it picks up per turn of the handle, so you can fish a bait faster. But the key to having that higher gear ratio is that when you have a fish that's hooked and he's coming at you real fast, it's hard to keep up with him sometimes with a 5-to-1. So that 6.4-to-1 allows me to keep pressure on the fish, allows me to pick up a little bit more line. And with those fish, you know, you had to keep them pinned, had to try to keep them down from jumping, but you had to keep pressure on that fish because some of them were barely hooked. I mean, it was amazing that if there was a few of them that I landed that, I mean, I can't believe I landed them because they were barely hooked, you know, one point of the back treble. They were just kind of, I was getting them to react with that. I had to cover a lot of water, you know, because I didn't know when I was going to get bit, so I had to cover a lot of water. The swim bait and the crankbait allowed me to do that. When it was real windy, the crankbait was the deal. The rod that I was fishing it on is my signature rod from Dobbins. It's the Champion 805 CB glass, really long rod, long casts, and the key is it's a glass rod, so it's very soft. You know, I didn't get many bites a day, so you had to make every single one of them count. And only lost a few fish. I lost more fish actually on the last day, but it's just because they were eating it weird, and they actually started to jump on me, which is, it's a tough deal when you have that happen. But you know, day 2, day 3, barely lost any fish, and so it was a key deal cranking when the wind was up. Now there was times where, especially on like the 3rd day, where the wind laid down and it got bright out, it was slick. And so what I had to do is kind of change gears, and I would drop shot. So drop shot, but also I caught a couple fish. One key fish that I can remember, which put me in the top 12 on the 3rd day, at the end of the day, was on a spy bait. And I was throwing the Dual Realis. It's a 90 size. I believe that color is called Table Rock Indigo. It's just a really clear, translucent blue. I didn't have any, ideally it would have been nice to have some translucent perch colors, but this was the best color I had for the conditions. I just wanted something see-through, translucent. And you know, I basically would fish this in areas where I had caught fish earlier in the day, and I knew I needed one more big bite, and I got one that was about close to 5, probably right around 5 pounds. That put me in the top 12 going into the final day. I think I was sitting in 8th. And basically the rod that I fished it on, my favorite rod to fish a spy bait is the Dobbins Champion Extreme DX 742 SF. It's 7'4". It's a 2-power rod. It's got great tip, so it's actually a rod that you can see. I'm going to lower this rod a little bit. You see how soft it is, but it's still got good backbone. I like this rod for a lot of different techniques, but it really excels for finesse kind of cranking, like if you're going to fish a shad wrap. And I've really come to like it for a spy bait. It's my favorite. I've played with a bunch of different rods from them. It's my favorite rod for a spy bait. You see they got small treble hooks. They're pretty sharp, pretty strong, but you need a rod that's soft, and you need a rod that's long to make long casts. The whole key, whether I was fishing a swim bait, a crankbait, the spy bait, I had to make long casts a lot of times, you know. Just to, you know, a lot of times I felt like when they got real slick, those fish got spooky from the shadow of the boat. So a long cast was key. 3,000 size Team Lew's speed spin again, bigger spool, more line capacity, and I was fishing it, as far as the line goes, 6-pound Gamma Edge fluorocarbon. This is one of the few techniques that I still use straight fluorocarbon on. the spy bait. I think it has better action. It falls better, it sinks better. Basically, the retrieval deal with a spy bait was, I was fishing very similar like I was a swim bait. I cast it out there, I let it go down to the grass. I would basically fish it as close to the grass without getting it fouled. If you fished it too slow, because that grass was fine, it would get fouled in those props, so that wasn't good. So I had to play around with my retrieval speed, and I would just get it right above the grass, and that's when they would hit it. And it's pretty cool because, you know, this technique is still kind of new to me, but it works really well in certain situations. I've found applications for it. You just have to throw it at different times. It seems like when the fish will follow other baits and not commit to them, this is the type of bait that you can get it in front of them. They will analyze it, but they'll still hit it. Like a swim bait, they'll analyze it sometimes and they'll just follow it. They won't hit it. They'll analyze this and they'll hit it. So, you know, I'm gaining confidence in this bait. The 90 size, I believe, is made for a bait caster, but I like how it falls fast and I can fish it a little bit faster. I've tried the 80 sizes and I guess I haven't got them dialed in yet, but the 90 size is my favorite right now for that. So a couple key fish caught on that. Also caught a couple key fish on an X-Zone skinny slammer. That's a perch color. Aaron Martin's 1/0 Gamakatsu drop shot hook. The weight is a 3/8 ounce drop shot, just a cylindrical weight that I made from a Do-It molds. I make a bunch of these. Save a ton of money by making your own drop shot weights, and you can get whatever size you want. So caught a couple key fish on that. A lot of times, you know, when there wasn't a lot of grass, when I fished in a little bit thicker grass, and there wasn't much of it, but there was a couple areas where there was just a little bit thicker, I caught a couple key fish on the Rains bubbling shaker. You notice I have it Texas rigged on you can either make it yourself or you can buy it. That's a RoboWorm rebarb 3/0 medium wire, or you can just make it. Basically, it's a Gamakatsu 3/0 worm hook that you can make your own. I got a video, if you look in some of my older YouTube videos on how to make your own. I make my own, it's cheaper that way, and I can make a bunch more. And 1/2 ounce Do-It molds sinker. The rods for the drop shot is pretty much consistent through the Texas rig and the nose hook. Dobbins rods DX703 SF, and I like the 3 power. A lot of guys use a 702, a lot of guys use a 2 power for drop shotting, but whenever I get to the Great Lakes, it's a different, you're talking about different fish. These are the biggest of smallmouth that you're going to come across. They got thick mouths. You have to use a little bit heavier duty tackle. I like the 703. It has more backbone. Still got good tip, but it's got more backbone, and the whole deal with the backbone is for the hook set, but also to leverage those fish. Some of these fish fought incredibly, and you really need a rod that you can just, they're not going to manhandle you. You can manhandle them and get them to the boat, and that's the whole key. When I drop shot, I use the 2000 size Lew's Team Pro Speed Spin spinning reel, 10-pound Gamma Torque braid, and an 8-pound Gamma Edge fluorocarbon leader. If it got real bright, I would go down to a 6-pound Gamma Edge, but a lot of times when there was low vis, a little bit of clouds, I'd go to an 8. You know, with those fish, like I said, they pull so hard, you wanna use a little bit heavier tackle if you can get away with it. If it was clear, you'd have to downsize the line. But that was pretty much in a nutshell what I did. When it was windy, I would crank. When it was kind of medium wind, I would throw the swim bait. Making contact with the grass was key. When it slowed down, the spy bait definitely ruled, and drop shot. So hopefully this helped you guys, and it was a good event. You know, I definitely lost some fish, but that with smallmouth and warm water, you're going to lose some fish in 4 days. It's hard to land every single one of them, but it was a good event. Hope this helps you guys. God bless, and next year is another year.